Well, welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I'm joined today with Josh and Owen, and we are going to be going over the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs, kind of what schemes they run, what their 2024 season looks like, maybe a little bit of the 2025 outlook. But before we get into that, Josh, how's life?
Life's good. Back at it every Wednesday here. You'll be able to catch me and Owen going over NFL teams for the foreseeable month or so. Every Wednesday and Thursday here on the Draft Professor, you're going to get at least two teams every night from me and Owen on Wednesday, and then the Thursday podcasters as well. So you're going to get that every Wednesday and Thursday. You got the continuous college scouting videos on Mondays and Tuesdays. Fridays, you're getting content as well. You're getting a full week's worth of content, and we just got into the off season, new year 2026 for the NFL. So if you are looking for 12-month coverage of the NFL extensively, as deep as we can get into, you won't find a better place here than the Draft Professor. So thank you, everybody, for still tuning in the middle of June, and this is going to be a lot of fun. Talking about Miami and Kansas City today.
Yep. And technically, Josh, just to help you with your math, it's the beginning of June. It's only June 4th. I'm just saying. But Owen, no fights in a hockey game today before the podcast?
No, I can't promise there won't be some on Sunday though, so that'll be fun if we get into that. We got a doubleheader over there with the NBHL, the National Ball Hockey League. I'm in Buffalo's division, so gets pretty intense. So not today, but definitely Monday was a bit sidetracked by it. But we got through it. We're here, and this is one of my favorite times of the week is just to be able to sit down and talk ball and stuff. So it's like record high heat right now in Buffalo. I'm melting in I also, for the brand, I had to pull out the triple X Josh Dobbs Tennessee jersey. Didn't play for either of these teams we're going to talk about, but I didn't want to wear the John Ross because I think he played for the Chiefs for like a hot second.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if he did or not, so I just decided to pull out the biggest, baggiest one I had to get some ventilation in here because I'm in my I'm upstairs, and it's like easily like 85 degrees in here. So if it looks like I'm drowning in my own sweat, it's probably because I am.
Yeah, and I am off-site. I'm actually doing a convention in Detroit by day, and then the podcast from the hotel, and the hotel feels a little stuffy too. So that being said, we are going to dive in. We're going to do the Miami Dolphins first. So let's dive into the Miami offense a little bit. Josh, how would you describe the Miami Dolphins offense from a scheme perspective?
Their scheme is unique when you compare them to everybody else in the NFL. And really, you have to look at their head coach first before you talk about anything in this offense. Mike McDaniel comes from the San Francisco tree, that wide zone scheme, getting the ball out quickly, a lot of timing routes, working the short to intermediate parts of the field. And that what was every Miami fan wanted that for Tua, a coach that actually surrounds Tua, supports Tua, and is the best fit for him personally. So they bring him into Miami, and first year you see glimpses of it. But this is a predominantly wide zone based team. They're going to try to make one cut runs with their running backs. The types of running backs they get are very specific to their scheme as well. They're looking for those smaller, agile, fast, ultra athletic running backs that's able to break away any run once they get one lane into the second level. So they're looking for big plays in the running game. They're also looking to get the ball out really quickly with their speedsters, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Malik Washington. They're not looking for Tua to hold the ball back there long. They're trying to get the time of throw under 2.5 seconds almost every time that they're passing the ball. It's rare you will see deep passing concepts with this team unless it is a one read Tyreek Hill post ball or a Jalen Waddle post ball, something along those natures with a crossing route. But a lot of short to intermediate stuffs with the Miami Dolphins, and honestly is the offense for Tua.
And Owen, what do you think of that assessment? Do you see it the same way or anything different?
Yeah, I think so. It's a branch off of the Shanahan tree, so you get a lot of wide zone concepts, being able to spread them out and have the running back decide which hole he's going to cut off of and give them some options and really try to either get the edge with their speed or create some one cut and go, kind of like Josh was saying. I think what's really interesting about Miami and what they've kind of taken from McDaniel's time with San Francisco is they implement a lot of two-back stuff, and they run a lot of like heavier personnel. So like they have Alec Ingold at fullback. They run a decent bit of two tight end, or they'll bring in like a bigger jumbo size like slot tight end or slot wide receiver, just to give them some extra bodies on the edge there to block who can also move. So they're not going to be one of those teams that like line up in the I formation and run down your throat. I know one of their favorite plays running like third and short last year. I remember watching a lot of Lockdown and Dolphins. It was the fullback dive. That was like their key play to go for on short down distance, and it wasn't working much. It's because, and a lot of that is because Tua's not great at sneaks, and their running back room with Mostert being hurt last year just don't really have the bodies that can pound, inside those power run schemes there. So yeah, they have like players like Jalen Wright, 4.3 speed, Devon Achane, who's kind of more like receiving back, who has some speed with him too. He's been definitely an explosive play machine. And they're just looking for explosive plays throughout this offense, between the wide zone, trying to hit plays big. Like Josh said, they really want to play into Tua's strengths. Tua is really good with anticipatory throws, being accurate, finding those holes in the zones, and leading his receivers into that, and allowing them to make plays after the catch. And you see that also reflected with like their tight ends. I know he's been on the trade block recently, but like Jonnu Smith was a perfect fit for that offense because he's someone where you have a ton of speed on the outside with Waddle and Hill. They're going to clear out coverages, going to make them play deep and have you work the underneath. And then you have players like Achane, like Jonnu Smith, who can take the ball in the short area and then make plays after the catch and exploit that space. So their whole sets of offenses spread you out, create space, and then attack those space with guys who can use or attack it with the ball in their hands. So that's really what they like to do there. I do think they do have an element of deep passing to their offense. It's specifically when you're tired of getting gashed from them throwing it short in that zone space that you give up, and they'll run some man. And when that happens, they'll always have like a go-to check to play where either Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle is just screaming down the field and one-on-one man coverage, and Tua can then hit it that way. They're good for like 1 to 2 big passing plays like that a game, or at least attempts, just because if a team tries to run that man concept, they're ready for it as well. So they have a good set up for offense. They're always going to get chunk plays. It's just going to be whether or not they can finish those. And that was their big problem last year, was red zone offense and being able to do stuff when they didn't have a ton of space and it got more constricted down there.
Yeah. So I guess 2 questions, and I guess I will gear the first one towards the offensive line. So I heard outside zone from both of you is the, let's say, primary running scheme. Would you say that there's a certain characteristic in the offensive linemen that they've drafted? I think they drafted Sabanea, correct?
Yeah.
Would you have said that Sabanea was an outside zone lineman, like as you guys were looking at his tape? Or would you have just said he's a lineman that could play multiple schemes? How would you have, like, what was your assessment on Sabanea, and then kind of pair that with how you see him for Miami?
Yeah, I think them going 7A, they went with a different style of attacking the roster through the draft this year, especially with Kenneth Grant and 7A, guys who were known as more like powerful players, bigger guys. But 7A, as a tackle, I didn't think he could really survive as a zone blocking tackle just because he didn't really have that level of athleticism. I think once he kicks inside the guard and he takes over for Liam Eichenberg inside there, he shouldn't be fine. I don't think he'll struggle. I think he'll bring an element that they haven't really had with their interior run blockers, and they'll still sacrifice a little bit of that optimal zone movement skill that they're looking for. Because when you're looking for zone blockers, you're looking for, especially in the interior, guys who can reach over gaps and seal off blocks, get to the second level, be able to open up more space and allow the running back to be able to see what's in front of him and have him make the decisions, as opposed to taking a guy and driving him out of the way so the running back can come right behind you. You're just more so getting hat on hat, guy on guy, and allowing the running back to then read through it. So you also see that reflected in players they've had in the past with Aaron Brewer at center, like super undersized center, but really good at those movement style blocks, being able to seal, get to the second level, help chip and go up. And he's perfect for their scheme that way. Same thing with Austin Jackson, one of the more higher athlete tackles. So you see them in their past investments, whether it's a free agency or the draft, going after players who fit that scheme. And even a guy like Sabanea, if he clears the threshold to be able to work in his own blocking scheme as a guard, they'll take him because he also brings a different element they haven't really had in an offensive line so far.
And the only thing I'll add to that is I think when Miami was making that selection in the second round, I think they were thinking more about passing downs with their interior offensive linemen more than they were with their running scheme and how he was going to execute. Let's be real, Jonas Avenea is not the ideal wide zone type running back. I mean, offensive lineman you would think of, but that's going to get mitigated once he gets to the inside. It's going to be way better for them on third downs because he'll be able to hold up one-on-one against whoever's going up against him. More than half the time than not, he will be more than a solid pass protector right away. Right away, an upgrade from Leon Eichenberg, who Miami fans were going crazy over the past couple years, one of the lower end starters in the league, and was really they were coming after his job, whether it was through free agency or the draft. So I think they were thinking more priority on passing downs with their interior offensive linemen, but I don't think he's going to be let's say like a liability in their running scheme.
Okay, so this is a question coming from somebody like I can't, like, it's not in my brain to be able to like analyze tape, but is outside zone more a flavor of the type of tackle you want or more a flavor of the entire offensive line when you're looking for a scheme fit?
It's a good question.
Because I heard the same answer from both of you, that because I had the impression that Savanea was a power. His game, like when I was listening to, the different people that were covering offensive linemen, right? Because actually was Savanea one of the guys actually that Newton Owen covered.
Yeah.
I heard a power profile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's more important for tackles and most important for probably your center is where you're going to look for that a lot, because if you have guards like a Savanea, who is more of a power guy, he has movement. He has adequate level of movement to run the scheme. Like Josh was saying, I think they were like, okay, this guy clears our threshold where we think he will keep his head above water as a zone blocking runner or a zone blocker, which I'll get into that in a second, what that means for the guards. But we think he'll be more, his impact as a pass blocker will outweigh him not being a super dominant mover for zone blocking. For when you're talking about tackles versus guards in that scheme, you're looking for players like, especially in the guards, because the D tackles aren't going to be your faster lateral moving guys. They're going to be guys who come up upfield. And if you are a guard in that system, even if you don't fully reach him, because like say you're running to the ball to the right, the running back's going to take an open step to the right, start moving right, and then find and be able to analyze that. So if you're a guard, if you don't fully seal the guy, or you're just able to neutralize him so he can't extend and get off and make a play while moving, you're going to be fine as a guard. Whereas tackles, you're dealing with much more athletic edges. And if an edge can get upfield and get around your outside shoulder and then force that running back to now not have that option to bounce it out, he has to choose either one of the inside gaps he has to choose from. Either one can freeze up and then the edge makes the tackle behind the line of scrimmage, or B, it makes the wrong decision and runs back into a gap that he wasn't totally sure about beforehand. And that's where you want your tackles to be able to get out into space really quickly, kind of like a screenplay where they're getting out into depth and not allowing guys to get upfield and impact the run back inside. And then for your center, it's going to be a lot of him chipping and getting to the play side backer, specifically so that way that guy can't read off of, okay, the guard's got this guy, the tackle's got the edge. I have a free run lane here in like the B or C gap to crash on this play and again force the play back inside to my backside backer. So your center, whether it's going whatever way it's going, he's going to have to get up to the second level. And you also see this with your backside tackle as well in these kind of plays. When you're running away from one of the ends, you oftentimes will leave them. The backside tackle goes to the backside linebacker. The center goes to the play side linebacker. And that's where that movement skills really comes into play. So that way you're getting to those guys at the second level, and the running back can make his decisions off of that. And you're banking on that backside edge, not being able to bend and really close the distance on the gap there before you're running back and hit the gap and go.
Yeah, and to also answer your question earlier, I believe tackles are more important for the wide zone scheme just because of how they have to kick out the zone every single time. They have to kick out the edge. You have to have that arm length. You have to have that athletic ability to get out to your spot and engage and still drive off the ball. So they were in a much better scenario when Teron Armstead was still on this team, and then they were slowly bringing Austin Jackson along, and now he's gotten into a comfortable state where he's a solid starter now. Now it's going to fall on Patrick Paul if he can step up and be somewhat of a semblance to what Teron Armstead brought in the running game for them. That's going to be the biggest question mark for them. How far does Patrick Paul evolve in this scheme? Because in my mind, with the pick of Savanea, kind of Patrick Paul's skill set and the selection of Ollie Gordon, pickup of Alex Madison in free agency, I don't think they want to be an exclusive wide zone team anymore. I think they want to incorporate those short yardage situations with a power horse back, just at least throw it out there more this season than they have in past seasons, just because of how their roster has been constructed with the Terrar Marstead retiring and the people they brought in. I think they're going to incorporate that a little bit more this year because of their personnel.
Okay. And then the second question for Miami, if you look at Waddle, Washington, Hill, would you profile them from, let's say, how you looked at those guys as they were coming out? Are they really similar types of wide receivers? Or would you say that they're different styles of wide receiver? How do you...
That's tricky because nobody's Tyreek Hill. Let's get that out of the way. Nobody has what Tyreek Hill has. Jalen Waddle falls under that mold, let's say, when we're talking about the height, weight, athletic ability, how they move in open space. It's very comparable. Malik Washington, you can also push in there because of the height, but he likes to win more with bully ball after the catch, being a tough catch guy, contested catch in the short parts of the field, being able to move the stick. So, yeah, they're all shorter brands of receivers, but they play in the Mike McDaniel's scheme as well. So that's why you saw them go out and get Tyreek Hill a couple years ago. But it's interesting. Let's think about it. Jonnu Smith is on the trade block. Tyreek Hill, every year we always get a rumor of him being on the trade block or not. They are in a really weird predicament right now of keeping the same roster that they've had, also thinking about the future. And when you have a guy like Jalen Waddle kind of in the similar mold of Tyreek Hill, it makes you think how long that a guy like Tyreek is going to stay on this team, or Jonnu Smith, because they do need to incorporate a true X-style receiver at some point. You saw them bring in Nick Westbrook-Akine for run blocking help, which will be far more amazing than any Miami fan can imagine right now. He will really help them, especially on early downs, but they are trying to look to evolve their offense, not be one-dimensional like they were the past couple years.
Yeah, I think with Waddle, he is. I mean, I wouldn't call him the closest thing to Tyreek Hill because nothing's really close. But like, if you're looking for somebody to replicate what Tyreek Hill does for your offense, you have a much better chance of getting that from Jalen Waddle than like the Chiefs did with drafting Rashee Rice or signing Hollywood Brown. Like when Tyreek Hill's gone, Waddle will be a much easier replacement for Hill than anybody else could be potentially. And I think with the shift we've seen in what they're doing with their offense, bringing in Savanea, wanting to bring in Madison, wanting to run some of those power concepts, and really kind of shifting and changing their lifestyle or life cycle to be more so a team that's ready to add some pieces and shift philosophies a little bit. While Tua's still there and he's good with his anticipatory throws, and you're still going to have that element of you're worried Waddle's going to attack you over the top, so you're going to have space cleared out for some of these players. Like they run Devon Achane in the slot a ton just to get him in space and use him after the catch. Similar to what they did with Jonnu Smith, like I said, another guy who excelled after the catch. And you're talking about bringing like X receivers. They brought in Andrew Armstrong in the draft this year. That's a guy who's going to be your stereotypical X. Nick Westbrook-Akine kind of fills that Matt Collins style role they had with him a few years ago when he was on their roster. So they do have players that they bring in that have that like typical X body type, but more often than not, between Hollins, now Westbrook-Akine, and even Andrew Armstrong, at least initially in his career, are going to be guys who are going to be more so bringing size to help with the run game, help with getting more running space or getting more space in the running game on the edges there. So I do think they're well set up to move off of Tyreek Hill because of what they have. And you just think about going back to like his initial trade from San Francisco, where he had Deebo Samuel as this underneath run after catch threat, Brandon Ayuk as more of an outside receiver. That's what they're going to be trying to, I think, move more towards, is getting a guy who can complement Jalen Waddle on the outside, as well as being like kind of more of a slot option, not relying on HN or even like a Jonnu Smith as much, bringing in a wide receiver who can do that more so.
Okay. And then for the Miami defense, Josh, how would you define the Miami defense?
Well, they had an obvious need going into free agency, which was their interior defensive line. Going into the draft, they had Zach Sealer, and that's it for their interior defensive lineman. So they were forced to go that way in the draft, and they did supplement properly. But this is it's a weird defense. You got aging veterans who contribute right now and will always bring a solid floor and have Pro Bowl potential. You got young guys on the interior that you're trying to build up. You got old veteran inside linebackers who bring a stable presence but don't bring anything over the top. You got a solid defense, but it's in a very weird place of young players trying to develop and old players still trying to compete. It's going to be really interesting to see who stays on this roster at the end of the season.
Yeah, Josh, I can't remember. I'm blanking on their defensive coordinator's name. I just heard it. I was listening to some things before I got on the podcast here to get some refreshers and last minute research in. But he was a former Anthony Weaver. That's his name. There we go.
Yeah.
He was a assistant with the Baltimore Ravens now 2 seasons ago before being hired out and to become the defensive coordinator of the Dolphins. So you see some things that the Ravens like to do reflected in this Dolphins defense. I don't think they really have the horses there to replicate what the Ravens do. Now they have like the styles of players they like they have their 3 down linemen. I'm a little worried about Kenneth Grant being a 5-tech D end. If like Benito Jones, who's like this super big nose tackle guy, is going to be that 0-tech, that might be a little concerning for me. But Zach Sealer is a good 5-tech player. And then they have between Jalen Phillips, Chop Robinson, and Bradley Chubb, they have those like 3-4 outside linebacker style rushers. So effectively, it's a 4-3 with the potential of one of those outside rushers dropping out into coverage every so often. And they've experimented with their secondary a lot. Like Jalen Ramsey was there for a couple seasons now, and last year he was a lot of nickel corner. And then they had Kader Kohu, who was more of a nickel corner build, playing more outside corner. And they run similar stuff to like how Baltimore runs, where they'll mix in a lot of cover 3, kind of shifts to a man coverage on the field. So, and I mean, they haven't really made many additions there. They like their 2 safety tandem, of having more traditional free safety in the middle of the field, strong safety buzzing down to kind of take that underneath coverage. So I don't trust this defense, particularly with the talent they have, but I do trust like their defensive coordinator and his pedigree coming from the Ravens and putting together pieces there that could get the job done. But for me, what their identity is right now, like especially like the corners and even the safety to a slight bit, I don't really understand what they're going for there. Like I know the Ravens mold and model. We've seen consistency there, and him coming from the Ravens model, you'd think they'd go one way or the other, but they draft Cam Smith in the 2nd round, who's kind of this lesser athletic, more zone corner type player. Kader Kohu, like I said, a nickel corner. Maybe you can view him as like the Marlon Humphrey super light role, where like he's not anywhere near Marlon Humphrey, but he's kind of this inside-outside player. Jalen Ramsey, similar thing, inside-outside type player. They just don't really – I don't think they have a cohesive identity in that secondary right now that makes you confident to say they're looking for one player over the other, because they can really go anywhere because it's all bad right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so I'll put you on the spot. So, Josh, what place will Miami finish in the AFC?
The Jets will be otherwise. I'm not going to put them last in the division, but I would say they're the 3rd best team. Now, I'm banking on a little bit of a New England renaissance with Vrabel coming back, them adding a shit ton of pieces in free agency, having a decent draft as well. I think New England will have a bounce back year, so to say, but they will be fighting with Miami, in my opinion, for that 3rd seed, unless New York gets out of their 25-year slump they've been in.
Oh, what do you think?
So I have a video coming out soon. I have to edit it now, but I recorded it, and I predicted all the games of the season, and so I have the division rankings I have predicted out, and I've said the Bills are number 1. I think they're going to be best team in that division by far and away. And I don't think there's really any argument about that from any of the other teams in that division. But for me, I had the Dolphins at 2 with a 9-8 record, and then the Patriots at 3 with an 8-9 record. So like they're right there with each other. I just think maybe I have a lot of faith in Tua. Again, this is, with this prediction, it's all if everyone stays healthy. That was another thing that happened to them last season was Tua got knocked out in that week 2 game against the Bills with a concussion. Got knocked out, I think, a 2nd time with another concussion that year. It was really scary. There was a whole retirement talks again. But if they are able to stay healthy, I think between Tua being a guy who's led the league in passing yards before, they still have Jalen Waddle. Mike McDaniel is still a good offensive play caller. I do think that offense can win them some games, especially against some bad teams. I just don't think that their defensive talent is up to snuff, and their accessory pieces on offense, especially outside of Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill's gone, outside of him as well, at wide receiver, even tight end, they're going to struggle a bit with consistency. But I do think I'm going to side on them being number 2 over the Patriots because they have that consistency with quarterback, coach. There's nothing really that new in the major positions of their roster right now or their coaching tree.
But that's why we're both a little bit weary on this roster, because this is an Owen scenario probably one of the better case scenarios for this Miami team if they all stay healthy together. This exact roster is cohesive and makes a wild card, let's say. Do we think they're going to get out of the wild card? Do we think they're going to make a run in the playoffs? No, they're in a very weird predicament with star guys like Jalen Ramsey, Zach Steeler still on this team, Jonnu Smith, Tyreek Hill, and they're going to be relying on a lot of rookies this year more than Miami Dolphin fans expect. Kenneth Grant, Jordan Phillips, and Zeke Biggers are all going to be in the interior defensive line rotation. You only have 2 veterans in that interior defensive line room. Efemli Melifonwu and Ashton Davis are your starting safeties, but your best backup is Dante Trader right now. And I love Dante Trader to death, but he was probably going to be starting at some point in this season. Their cornerback depth, if they get rid of Jalen Ramsey for cap reasons, you got Kohu as your only solidified starter, and Storm Dunk, Cam Smith, and Jason Marshall, who they took in the 6th round, I believe. So there's a lot of unprovenness right now, especially in the depth of this defense. And there's a lot of cause for concern when you think about this Miami Dolphins team.
Can I say one last thing that actually be nice to the Dolphins for once?
Yeah,
even though I despise them. I think Zach Sealer is one of the most underrated players in the league, just because no one ever talks about him. I did a video when the Madden 25 ratings came out where I did a top 10 rankings of who I thought got snubbed the hardest. And Zach Sealer came into that game having an 80 overall. He had 10 sacks in 23. He's been their best defensive player, brackets general, since he's been there and since he's taken over. He made them not miss Christian Wilkins, and that's impressive. Yeah. He's a very good defensive lineman. The problem is he's their only consistent one, and he got hurt last year. He got poked in the eye ahead of before their second Bills game. It was in the game before that. And he had an injured orbital bone, played through it later in the season. He's a dog, and it just sucks that he's one of the only beacons of light on this defense, especially when everyone's hurt all the time. Between Bradley Chubb didn't play majority of last season because he was recovering from an injury the season prior. Jalen Phillips got knocked out again for another season-ending injury. It's not just Tua that's the injury concerns there. It's big players on both sides of the ball that you really have to worry about and consider, okay, is this team, when I'm projecting how much they're going to win, even if they are completely healthy, I don't love their roster, but there's no way that they're going to last the whole season without a major piece being knocked out. It just happens every year.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins will finish 3rd in the division. But I would also say I think there's only a couple of teams that scare me more from an offensive perspective.
Right.
If everybody on Miami is healthy, right, especially on that offense, this is a team that I don't want to play, right? The same way you could probably say that about the Bengals and the Chiefs, right? If their offense, if everybody's healthy, those are teams that are dangerous. They could light you up for 50 any week.
Yeah, we've seen it before. They dropped 70 on the Denver Broncos,
yes,
especially with the Baltimore Ravens. Tua came a couple years ago on a 28-point comeback in the 4th quarter. It is still in this team to be that explosive in offense. I think last year they got a little bit caught up in their identity too much. Let's be real. This is one of the most used motion pre-snap teams in the entire NFL. They're kind of pushing that trend into every NFL team right now because they're doing it so much. I think they over-relied on that a little bit last year. There wasn't a lot of diversity in their passing schemes. A lot of it was one read and check downs to the Devon A chain. That's why you saw him get so many reps getting those dump down passes at least 3 or 4 times a game, just because there's not a lot of full field progression reads in this offense. I think if they just try stuff in the first month or 2 months of the year, then you'll be able to have more stuff when you're getting into November and December. And Miami is ultimately known for not being a cold weather team. So if they're able to just diversify their scheme a little bit more in the run and pass game, you'll see way more consistency out of this offense.
Yeah. I can't even think of the last time that Tua played 17 games.
Which is the sad reality of this situation. But to Mike McDaniel's credit, he has 2 quarterbacks in the room that does fit his scheme. Now, to the outside, they are laughable if you look at it from the outside looking in, Zach Wilson and Quinn Ewers. But when you think about those 2 types of quarterbacks, they fit this Mike McDaniel offense, at least in the passing perspective, to a T. What he wants out of their quarterbacks: quick, get it out, being able to throw from different arm angles, being athletic in the pocket to an extent. So he's got guys behind Tua. I don't think that's going to be a concern this year in the backup quarterback play, but Tua is the question. Jalen Phillips is the question. Tyreek Hill is the question. There is a lot of questions to be answered.
Jim, I just looked it up real quick for you. He's only started 17 games in the season one time, and that was the 23-24 season when he led the league in passing yards. Like, so when he's healthy, he's a good player. Like, their record with him as a starter is 38-24. Like, he's not a bad quarterback.
No,
it's just simply, can he be healthy for a full season?
Okay, so why don't we pause for a quick commercial? So, Josh, you want to let everybody know who you are and how they can find you?
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter at juice_T23. You can also check me out here every Wednesday for the next month or so on the Draft Professor podcast, talking about different NFL teams. And then once we get back into the college football season, you'll see me appear every week or so, giving over my prospect reports on guys on different positions going through the 2026 season. So I'll be on there. You also get full report, draft report from all 32 teams here in the next couple of weeks. I'll make that available on Twitter. That's what I'm working on right now in my free time, the little that I do have. But for the off season, you'll catch a little bit less of me, but you'll catch me here every Wednesday.
Oh,
yeah. So right now I'm posting a lot over on the YouTube channel at Weekly Huddle, especially, and I'm also posting a decent bit over on Twitter, especially promoting the YouTube channel. So I have some stuff in the pipeline. Newt's been helping me out, sending me some videos for his summer scouting series. You'll be seeing his wide receivers video come up sometime this week. I have another video that I'm putting up myself, like I said, predicting the entire season, and then we'll have some more Draft Professor come on later on in the offseason to do some collaborations and just talk some ball, because this is what I love doing. This is why I do this on Mondays and Wednesdays with Jim. This is why I'll be back with Newt on Wednesdays in the season. Just being able to sit down and like talk out some of the stuff that we're seeing right now. On Mondays, we're doing scouting for specific teams. This past Monday, we did Clemson, and I think I ended up watching 22 players for Clemson specifically. Virginia Tech, I'm not going to be on that episode, but that one has like 5. So I chose the right one to miss, I guess, or I guess wrong one if you want to make an easy workload. But we also have ideas to cover Michigan State. I want to do an episode entirely on the MAC, so you can catch those on Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Wednesdays, me and Josh are breaking down teams. Next week, we're doing the Jets and the Bengals, talking about schemes and what kind of players fit those teams. So if you are interested in anything that I'm putting out, you can find me here on the Draft Professor. You can find me over my YouTube channel, and you can follow me over on Twitter to get updated with whatever else I'm going to be working on.
Yeah. And when I created like the concept for Draft Professor, I was telling myself, it is way better to hop in front of a camera and talk to people this way than to go on Twitter and make a comment. Then I'm impatient. If I reply, I want to see somebody's reply to me quickly. I don't want to see it like the next day. So to me, this is way better from let's say a mental health standpoint, to be talking with people than it is to be on social media doing the chatting. So we see Home Squad Sports. I know that there's 2 of them, Dalton, and I'm the other name is blanking. And I know that Dalton was on Monday. Both people from Home Squad Sports will be podcasting regularly with the Draft Professor this cycle. So it's good to see you guys here too. You can follow the channel. There we go, right there. NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. We have daily draft content. So Mondays and Tuesdays, we are breaking down specific college draft classes. We had an awesome Clemson show on Monday. We followed it up with Penn State last night. Next week is Virginia Tech and Notre Dame. The week after will be like Michigan State, South Carolina, I think. And we're going to be going through, I think we're going to be able to cover between 24 and 32 college football teams. So that's kind of what we do. But hit that subscribe. The best thank you can give the channel. Hit the subscribe on YouTube. We literally are coming at you every day with some type of content. More team breakdowns tomorrow for NFL teams. And then Friday, we're beginning our breakdown of the quarterbacks in the upcoming draft class. And I believe there's going to be about 4 draft professors. Randall, Bill, Durst, Anthony, I believe are the 4. And if more draft professors want to join, we're trying to make Fridays a party. So Um, that being said, the next team that we are going to break down is the Kansas City Chiefs. So, Owen, you want to start with the offense and the defense?
So that's tempting because you have some of the more, you have Patrick Mahomes in the offense and all the fun big names there. But I'm a big defense guy, and the way that Steve Spagnuolo runs. So we'll rip the defense because that's my favorite part to talk about. Especially because Steve Spagnuolo has been such a just stud in there, like easy Hall of Fame coordinator. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. Just the amount of hardware he has and the impact he's had, especially as this Chiefs defense. And I agree, Home Squad Sports. He looked phenomenal at the spring game. He was jacked, so I can't complain. But just to go over the Chiefs defense real quick, you have some trends there. They also just draft good players. Like they have a ton of guys that I really liked coming out that they ended up drafting, like Carl Loftus, Leo Chenal, Cam Jones at linebacker, and then obviously they had some hits with cornerback with Trent McDuffie. Previously, they had L'Jarius Sneed. So they are able to identify talent on that side of the ball pretty well. I'd arguably say better than they can on the offensive side of the ball, especially with earlier picks, which is what makes the defense a lot more interesting for me than the offense because you can look at the kind of players that they've invested in and see where their hits were, specifically like this D-line. So they have Chris Jones, obviously stud defensive tackle, probably the best D tackle in the league still. I don't know, Dexter Lawrence is giving them run for his money, but They've shown a trend what they like with the rest of their guys. So like Chris Jones just plays everywhere. You can't really pick him as an archetype for their defense. But they've shown previously between George Karlaftis, going Mike Dana at the other edge, even a guy like Felix Anudike-Uzomah, who they drafted in the past. They like some more of these condensed pass rushers, being able to compress or compression style pass rushers is the word I like to use. They like to compress that angle to the quarterback, not really do the outside rushing. You see that again. They drafted Ashton Gillott this year, or Gelati, however you pronounce his name. Someone who that was his bread and butter. I talked about it on the Monday podcast with Clemson, where I was watching. I tried to watch that Clemson game against Louisville for all the offensive linemen because I knew he was going to be out there, and it was going to be a good test for how they're going to handle NFL-style power rushers. And he fed Blake Miller his lunch. I mean, he did it with a lot of prospects, though, so can't really complain there. But you see a style of player they like on the edge, even with like Charles Omenihu, where they're bigger body guys, compress it, funnel it back inside their D tackles where they have Chris Jones, obviously. They just drafted Omar Norman-Lott, pass rushing savant at D tackle. I absolutely loved watching him this past fall. And I mean, they haven't really found a guy that was like consistent opposite Jones in the D tackle spot. They've took a lot of dart throws. I think they're hoping that Omar Norman-Lott. So many O sounds in that name. Omar Norman-Lott can be that guy opposite Jones and be kind of their pass rushing duo. They brought in like Jerry Tillery and they have Siaki Ika there, but like there's nothing really that stands out to you outside of Jones. Their linebacker room is impressive to me because they have a mix of different body types, and I'll leave it at the front seven once I get done with the linebackers so I can hear Josh's opinion on this because I know that this is kind of where they're most known for, and I'd like to see your opinion of what they do, especially with their blitz packages. But like their linebackers between Chenal, who could be an edge rusher type, while also being like more of a Sam linebacker, up to now, and including this year, you had Nick Bolton, who they had to bring back on because he was contract was up. One of the better downhill Mike linebackers. Remember when he was coming out of Missouri, that was his thing, was he just played with his hair on fire, firing downhill. And that was another thing that they like to do with their backers is they love to blitz. So you have a guy like Chenal, you have a guy like Bolton who are pros off the blitz, and then you have Drew Tranquil, who's more of that coverage style linebacker, can drop into coverage when everyone else is rushing and know his assignment and be able to take away the quick, easy throw to counter it. And then they've invested more so with Jeffrey Bassa, former safety turned linebacker, Cam Jones, another safety turned linebacker from Indiana. So they have a ton of guys that do different things, but they really plays into what Spagnuolo likes to do with his defense, which is send a lot of different various looking packages at you. They have guys who can play both inside and out, Karlaftis, Jones. They move those guys in and out. They send pressure from different places. Love their corner blitzes. So I'm curious to see with the front seven specifically what Josh thinks about that.
Yeah, as a Baltimore Ravens fan growing up, if looking at the Kansas City Chiefs, I have zero complaints about their front seven, and that's very scary because let's be real. This draft was very big for them. This offseason was huge for them to replenish so they can keep their window open. Their window will always theoretically be open with Patrick Mahomes at the helm. But we saw it this year. The roster was not the best around him. This was probably the weakest contending roster Kansas City has had going into the Super Bowl or a conference championship game in Patrick Mahomes' tenure. So they did an excellent job in the draft with Ormond Norman Lott, Ashton Gillette, and especially Jeffrey Baza, who's going to go under the radar. But their linebacker depth was very concerning for how good their starters are. And I think Jeffrey Baza fits into that defense so well with his high IQ, his high motor. He's just going to be somebody Spagnuolo is going to trust right away. And he's going to take the pressure off a guy like Drew Tranquill from playing him the whole entire game. Leo Chanel having him be on the field 90% of the time. So that was a great pick for Brett Beach in that front office. And I really, for a guy that wasn't a Norman Lott guy, so to say, because of his run defense concerns, that's a perfect pairing with Chris Jones. I mean, just how explosive, how versatile. You can line up Chris Jones everywhere. Ormond Norman Lott's going to be able to actually win from the interior and not put everything on their defensive ends to collapse the way they do. But you're right. They are looking for those specific types of prototypical defensive ends in the guys they draft. George Karlaftis has been all and more that they could expect out of him in that first round selection. Charles Omena, who has fit well into that rotation role. Mike Dana has been a great run defender throughout his time in Kansas City, and Ashton Gillette is only going to earn more and more opportunities in this system. FAU, Felix, and FAU, he's kind of house money at the point, really didn't develop. But if that's your one miss in the draft and you still got all these guys that fit your scheme so well, that allows those exotic blitzes, those exotic packages to come out. And what I was going to hit on that Owen really touched on at the end, this inside linebacker room is the MVP of this defense, is the reason why Chris Jones can line up in so many different places and still be good in run support, why they're able to send 6-7 at a time or show that double mug look and drop both of them back, because they got athletic guys like Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquill who can recover in space really well and play zone defense. They are so technically sound. They are very fundamentally sound in the run game, and they have guys that's able to cover and rush. It is a luxury for them to have this inside linebacker room. And it also takes pressure off the secondary, being able to eliminate the middle of the field theoretically and having them worry about the boundaries and not having to play those one high shells as much it's been the reason why they've been contending while Travis Kelce has been on the decline, while this wide receiver room has been up and down, to say the least. It's trending up, but the consistency with the offense and Mahomes has not been to their expectation the past year or two, but it's because this defense has really taken that step, and everybody saw it this year.
Yeah, and then bouncing back to the secondary there, I think so. We've seen a lot of players succeed in this secondary specifically, and we brought it up a little bit with blitzing. They run a lot of like corner blitz or slot blitz. It's definitely going to be something where you're going to have to want to play up at the line of scrimmage. You're going to be a corner for the system. But you've also seen them specifically, and this is something we brought up again on the Clemson podcast. You guys should really be watching on Mondays. We talk about a lot of fun stuff there, even when it's not involving the specific teams. But this was brought up because we were talking about Avion Terrell and kind of the undersized corner market and how that's affected right now. The Chiefs have shown no fear of going after these guys who are not prototypical size. L'Jarius Sneed was a projected safety in the NFL. They ended up taking him and becomes the number one corner. He's 6 foot 190 at the combine. Someone who's not super lengthy or super big and massive, but is able to play smart football, knows how to take the ball away, has great ball instincts and ball skills. So someone who that's their kind of archetype. You have him. You have Trent McDuffie, who is sub 6 foot. Thought to be only a slot corner because he's smaller. People who watch the tape could tell you that wasn't going to be the case. He was going to be an outside corner. He was a really good player. Again, another player who doesn't meet the size thresholds, but smart, technical player who had good instincts and ball skills despite not having the size to attack that. And that made that easier for them to move off of a guy like L'Jarius Sneed because they had McDuffie who was able to transition into being the number one corner. And then they ran a platoon of corners last year. Jalen Watson, I think, is probably their best option on the outside there. Another guy who's got some high upside athletically, but you wouldn't call like a super traditional like corner back. He gives up some big plays, but he's also willing. He's gotten a bunch of pick sixes in his career. I remember the one against the Chargers, that one. I think it was a Sunday night or Monday night football game that really swung that game in their favor. So that was a few years ago. But he's one of those guys who big play, again, ball skills, that's what they look for. It's not really going to be – they weren't going to be in the Darian Porter market, let me say that, for this last year's draft class. And safeties, they've had a ton of different guys. I think they do value more like a strong safety type. They've had Tyrann Mathieu in the past. Brian Cook is more of a free safety type. Now they have Jaden Hicks stepping into the lineup. They brought Mike Edwards back. They've had a bunch of rotating pieces back there at safety. I think Jordan Reed was there for a spell. They just have guys that they find that are smart, can work off each other, are willing to come up and fill in the run and allow their defense to play off and allow their front pressure looks to excel and then know what they're doing when they're covering up for those blitzes. So just smart players, ball skills, instincts. They're not really looking for prototypical size athletes there.
And I'll go back to the draft really quickly before we move on. The way they're able to just keep supplementing depth throughout the draft and not just developmental pieces in day 3. No, guys that contribute year 1 and being able to develop them from there. Ashton Gillette, we've already hit on, is going to be their defensive end 4, but a damn good defensive end 4. Jeffrey Baza is going to be the best backup linebacker they have, and that's pretty good for the experience of what he's bringing to the table. And then in that cornerback room, Noah Williams, not being afraid to take him in the 3rd round, fits their mold of making those big explosive plays at the CB position, making plays on the ball. And I like the pick so much because it fits more of a different mold of body type than they're usually drafting. And I thought that was very savvy by Brett Veach not to bring in another Jalen Watson type, another smaller Trent McDuffie type, bringing in somebody that's going to stick on the boundary and be great depth for them. But their depth, especially in the safety position, that's why they've moved on from Justin Reed, Tyrann Mathieu. They've been supplementing in the draft with Jaden Hicks, Brian Cook. The way they're able to rinse and replace these guys and the system gets better over time, it is very impressive on the coaching staff and this front office.
Okay. I've got 2 questions. So, Owen, you made a comment about you knew that the Chiefs wouldn't be drafting Darian Porter. So Porter will we say he was a raw prospect, right? He was more of an athlete that needed time to refine. Is that the right assessment or general in there?
I think he had Chiefsy traits when it came to, like, he had some natural zone instincts and he had some ball skills from being a receiver. But yeah, he was a guy that between run defense and tackling and man technique and even with off zone coverage technique, more so instead of just being like a down low zone player, he definitely needed refinement. Like I'm a little worried for him. I was a big Darian Porter guy. Him going to the Raiders and being thrust into like an early starting spot, that's something that like the Chiefs wouldn't. That's something that they wouldn't want to do. They want to get a guy like Noah Williams who also has good ball skills, but is more of a guy who's ready to play earlier on. Maybe doesn't have the ceiling of Darian Porter, but can still be an explosive playmaker and while still having some of that higher floor potential.
Okay, and then this is a Jim hot take. Okay, so if a team, and this builds on, like Josh, you've been saying that the Chiefs draft well, I definitely agree. But here's my hot take. If a team has 6 draft picks and drafts 3 offense and 3 defense, that draft is heavily favored to the offense because if a player plays on offense, most offensive players play nearly 100% of the snaps, right? You have 5 offensive linemen that play 100%, a quarterback that plays 100%, and then good wide receivers will play about 75, right? So if you draft 3 offense, 3 defense, it's always biased to the offense. And what I see the Chiefs doing is they don't draft a lot of offense. They draft a lot of defense, and it gives them the role players they need on the defensive line, linebacker at all 3 levels, and the DB. What do you guys think of that?
No.
Yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
I think that's fair, and especially what you were bringing up, I'll say this again. There's been a theory out there where, like Eric DeCosta, for example, has said he wants more at-bats on the plate. He wants to be able to take more swings on the table, and not every team gets the luxury of that every year. But for Miami and Kansas City, they had 7 and 8 picks respectively. They all picked someone this year that's going to contribute in some way, shape, or form. These aren't drafting developmental guys for the most part, besides like Quinn Ewers in the 7th round for Miami. Everybody that Kansas City picked this year is going to have a role year one. And you cannot say that about almost every draft from every year. Like, that's a rarity in itself. But you look top down through all 7 of these picks. Yeah, you're right. These defensive players that's the mold they do. Draft a good depth so they can rinse and repeat every 3 years. But the offensive talent that they picked this year was really impressive. And the past couple years, we've been a little iffy on like the Xavier Worthy, for example. Is Rashee Rice going to fit in this system? Brett Veach has been able to show everybody he's able to scout on the offensive side of the ball and develop properly with the coaching staff. So this Kansas City draft was I will keep hitting on it. It was very important for them.
Yeah, I think, and we'll touch on it a bit more when we get to the offense, but I think when you have a quarterback to the level of a Patrick Mahomes, you can take swings on offensive players in like free agency and like more bargain bin diving there and not worry. I mean, they've invested some higher picks in the offense, not to say they haven't, but like they did this year. But for them, they don't need to hit on as many players with that. Whereas defense, they love to rotate their guys in, and having Spagnuolo have as much options and weapons as he possibly can. They're going to stack that side and then trust Patrick and the offense and Andy Reid to make whatever they provide on the offense work. Like, they've made Juju Smith-Schuster a reliable receiver in their offense. Hollywood Brown didn't look terrible. So like there's definitely a way that they like to go after, and I think it's the freedom they get for having such cemented, like, and it's similar to like what we talked about, like the Ravens and the Bills. They can take swings on players on the offense, and you'll get complaints like with the Bills and Ravens where they weren't surrounding Josh Allen with enough talent at wide receiver, but they're still top 10 scoring offenses every year because they have those guys. Similar with the Chiefs, even though they haven't been to that level. When they take swings on offense, it's not like they need to go and fill it up with a ton of insulating talent. They have a force multiplier at quarterback.
Yeah, so that being said, we should pivot to the Chiefs offense. So other than the Chiefs offense having Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense being really good, how would we define the Chiefs offensive scheme?
Yeah, so they change it up a lot. In the time that Andy Reid's been there, they've gone from being more run-heavy offense to having more spread stuff. So they do like to change it up a lot. More recently, they've been running a lot more 2 tight end stuff, especially when they have a viable number 2 tight end and Noah Gray with Travis Kelce. A lot of their offense, especially their passing scheme, comes with where they're trying to get you in levels concepts or getting crossers where they can suck your linebackers in down low. You're focused on Kelce in the underneath, and they get a guy who has speed like Worthy, where this is where Tyreek Hill really excelled on the deep dig routes behind that second level of the defense right in front of the safeties where they can get them on the move. Kind of similar to what we talked about with the Dolphins, where you're trying to get guys in space to attack after the catch, and that's why you see them invest in speed a ton of the time. And having Travis Kelce has helped that a lot because you have a guy in Mahomes who has the chemistry with Kelce that they can always attack the underneath, and that's always there for them. And so since they're so keened in on that, and also the running game, which they've always invested in and had a strong running game while Mahomes has been there, they can now open up that second and third level where Mahomes, when he doesn't like what he has on the underneath, he can then start scatting and doing a bunch of improv stuff to either get the guys open on a second read or get out of the pocket, extend plays, and make plays down the field because he has that level of talent. So they've invested a lot in guys with speed. Obviously, Xavier Worthy. I wouldn't call really Rashee Rice a burner, but he's definitely a guy who can play on the outside and has that good chemistry with Mahomes to be able to react off of him and can be more of that outside comebacker route runner, has some more route running options for them to create separation on that second and third level from Mahomes to hit once he has the underneath coverage sucked in. So they have guys that are playing off that system where they're really just allowing Mahomes to find the guy who's going to be open because there's so many targets that are going to be taking attention from the defense. And then after that, you just want to have athletes out there because when Mahomes starts scrambling, he's going to get the right guy, the right ball, and they're going to make magic happen after the catch. And you've seen that a lot with how they've had running backs and tight ends contribute in the passing game consistently since Mahomes has been there.
And Josh, how would you define the Chiefs' offensive scheme?
We have seen the Chiefs' offensive scheme for the past 5 years. It never stays the same. They always have a different element to their offense they incorporate throughout every year for how their offense is constructive on paper and what fits their players the best. They are always evolving, but they're in a little bit of a stump rose now. They don't have the 3 solidified. They lost Joe Thuney in the offseason, so you don't have the continuity there. You have a little bit of a question mark with Kinsley Suamatea starting at left guard for them. You have no problems with Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith as your interior offensive linemen, both top 5 respectively per position for the Kansas City Chiefs and the whole entire NFL. But there's not that solidified, okay, we know we're going to get positive yardage through the A, B, C gap, no matter what, with the offensive line that's in place. Now, Josh Simmons, they brought in through the draft. Everybody was probably mad when they saw them pick that because everybody in the Super Bowl knew that obvious weakness for them. And then the best left tackle just falls to them at 32, excuse me. So they did their job in the offseason getting that bona fide left tackle, but that right tackle position still a little bit of a cause for concern, not in the run game, but in pass protection. When Jawan Taylor gets off the line of scrimmage, he has strong hands. He has the big question is if he gets off the line of scrimmage, if he doesn't false start every other play. That and Kinsley Sumatea is going to be a little bit of a cause for concern if you're Kansas City, but you put the trust in this coaching staff because they've shown a year in and year out that it does not matter who's on the field. They will be able to win more games than not. I'm just scared they're going to fall into what you were talking about, those level concepts a little bit too much, trying to force feed Travis Kelce a little bit too much, staying in the offense they've been running for the past 2 years without evolving like we've known Andy Reid to do. So I think Jalen Royals to pick in the 4th round was an amazing gift for them. He'll be able to work those intermediate routes amazing. Still fits that yard after catch role, but a bigger body type, kind of a little bit more of a Rasheed Rice, more technique in the routes, but less yards after catch. Somebody that I think will open up the passing concepts a little bit more for Patrick Mahomes because you saw it a little bit. He was forcing throws at the beginning of games throughout the regular season, and then Andy Reid would kind of hone everybody back in together, play for 1st and 10, 2nd and 5, short yardage scenarios, moving the sticks, taking a lot of time off the clock. They weren't looking for those big explosives that much unless it was a deep ball to Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy brought that element as a main, like it's still there in that offense, but it wasn't to the extent of Tyreek Hill being there and that old core from a couple years ago. So they know that Travis Kelce's window is it's closing. We got 2 more years if we're lucky of good tight end play from Travis Kelce. So they're starting to look into the future of, okay, how much are we going to incorporate what we did the last 2 years with what we're able to do this year? But you have Patrick Mahomes on your side. You have Creed Humphrey. You have Trey Smith. You have Josh Simmons. You have a great receiving core. You have a good running back room. There's a little bit of cause for concern, but you know what this team is going to put out every year.
Can I just say, Jim, after that Josh Simmons comment about how, yes, my number 1 offensive tackle in the draft falls to them at 32 because of that knee injury, you're a sick man for getting a Bills and Ravens fan on here to talk good about the Chiefs after they had the offseason, the draft they had. This is painful. Like, I loved everything they did. I would say, like Josh, over-under, by week 17, over-under 3.5 players they drafted this draft are starting for them.
Over. 17. Josh Simmons will start day 1. Ormond Norman Lab will start whether they like it or not. If an injury happens, Ashton Gillette will start in case of injury. There's a path for Noah Williams to start this year. There's a path for Jalen Royals to earn over 50% of the snaps. There's a path for Brashad Smith to be the 3rd down back consistently. If somebody gets down in the inside linebacker room, Jeffrey Baza will start for them. Like every pick was a hit for them this year. And it's very frustrating for the AFC and all of the NFL besides Kansas City.
So first of all, I do need to fact check both of you. Both of you said the Chiefs picked 32.
It was 31.
Okay, but technically they traded back to 32. Yeah. Okay. So,
was Josh Simmons the 32nd overall pick? Yes or no?
Right. They had the 31st pick and traded back to 32. But just in case any of those YouTube comments come in, we know that the Eagles won the Super Bowl, everybody. Like,
they'll let you know about it.
Yeah, so yes, we have a Bills and a Ravens fan have to talk about the Chiefs and the Dolphins. That's just the way it's going to work, a draft professor with these.
The Dolphins was so much easier. It was like, oh yeah, I think this team's gonna go 9-8, whereas the Chiefs are like, eight straight picks of starters. Thanks.
Well, if you want to see some high quality entertainment, EJ's an Eagles fan, and tomorrow night he has to talk about the Giants and the Commanders.
I'm getting into that.
Yes, I am cruel. I am cruel when I schedule everything. I gave you guys the AFC teams. I'm giving EJ the NFC teams. It's a sick world, and I'm a happy guy.
I mean, it makes sense because we see them the most of any team. Like, our favorite teams play them constantly. Like even with the last year with the Bills and Ravens have played like 4 times in the last 2 years. So we've seen each other so much that we would know what we're looking at specifically. And even if we wanted to go back and research, we could just watch the games of our favorite teams playing these teams and know exactly what we're looking at. And so it makes sense the way you structured it. It just makes me mad that I'm going to be more mad that the Chiefs just had a good offseason and I have to compliment them. That's the actually real thing. If they had a terrible offseason, I'd be loving that you gave me the Chiefs to tee up and just start wailing on them. But they didn't do that. They had a great offseason.
So Owen, that was part of the logic, is that if the Bills and the Ravens, so for example, next week we're going to do the Jets and the Bengals. The Bills and the Ravens play both of those teams next year. There is a method. Like I am, like as you guys are talking, right? I am looking at the schedules to say, well, who should we cover next week? If Bills fans are following the podcast, we're giving a season preview of nearly every single Bills opponent. Same thing with the Ravens. If Ravens fans are watching, like Yuri, Draft Professor, or Jin, who follows a lot of our content, if you're watching, we're giving you a preview of the teams that you're going to play.
Right.
And this is also going to help set up the website. I also want to give a shout out to Jake in the chat. So you will be able to catch Jake with Josh on Mondays. Jake, I know that you have a 2-month-old, and it may not even be 2 months, a 2-month-old newborn at home. So thank you for stopping by to check out the podcast, and I hope you're enjoying being a dad. It's kind of fun. I've been doing that for 17 years. It's kind of fun. So
let me throw out a couple names real quick. I want to get out there before we get out of here. They made some really good moves, especially in their offensive line, getting their depth. Jalen Moore coming over from San Francisco on a good contract deal, hasn't shown the proven starter consistency, but there was flashes on tape this year where he shows the ability to get off the line in those vertical sets and hold up in pass protection. So that will be a good replenishment plan if they want to move Josh Simmons to the inside for whatever reason, or if he goes down, you got at least a serviceable starter in that left tackle spot. I also love them bringing Esapole in from Washington State. They have interior offensive line depth concerns. Hunter Norzad was a great pick for them last year, but that's their backup center right now. CJ Hansen is probably their best backup interior offensive lineman. Esapole can play both the tackle and guard position, and I think he finds a way on this roster. And also Jake Brenningstool, the tight end out of Clemson. They sneakily brought him in as an undrafted free agent, and they got a weird mix of Jared Wiley, Noah Gray, who will be the tight end too, and has proven that and is worth being the tight end too on this team. He's more valuable than you guys think. But Jake Brenningstool being in there fighting for a special teams role, but even on some scenarios will be in contest and catches scenarios, having to separate over the middle of the field. That's a good body type to have in your tight end room. So there's a couple guys they brought in that in the undrafted free agent pool that can legitimately make this roster.
Yeah, and one of the things, like you guys were like counting the number of starters that you see, and you mentioned like Bassa, Rashard Smith. One of the things that I always tend to look at is who did a team draft 2 years ago that's starting today, as opposed to should the draft class start immediately?
Right.
And like for example, I could go to Buffalo, but I could even look at Kansas City. They drafted Jared Wiley last year.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, he's not going to start past Kelsey. But tight end takes so long to develop. If you know that you're eventually going to be moving on from Kelsey, like Josh, I think you pointed out, within the next 2 years, you need to have a lot of tight ends just because they take so long to develop and you don't know which one will develop. So you just need to keep, let's say, replenishing the coffers there.
Right.
Kind of thing. So
that's a consistent theme throughout this team, though. It's not just the tight end position. It's the interior defensive line. It's their defensive ends. This is how they build their roster. And yes, they have Patrick Mahomes, and he is the quarterback of our generation so far with just all the accolades he's accumulated. The way they roster construct, the way they build this roster is the reason why this window will always be open for them.
Cool. Well, you guys have any parting words? Or are we ready to go?
No, this was a really fun episode. I will throw this out there. It's hard to say I want a team to tank in the NFL, but this Miami Dolphins team, I would really love to see just trades start going this offseason. And not just because it'll make all the fans excited, it'll put Miami Dolphins fans in misery or whatever, but I think that's the best road for this team, moving off the big contract of Jalen Ramsey, Tyreek Hill. Jonnu Smith, I love for this offense. I love for this team, was probably their most underrated player last year. If you can get value on him, try to get so as well. I think they're in a weird phase of youth with Chop Robinson, Kenneth Grant, Jonah Savanea, Austin Jackson, Devon A-Chain, with older guys. It's a very weird roster construction, and yes, they will compete this year, but I don't know if it's in the best interest for this team to do so.
Yeah, I think they have the guys. Like if you kept a core of Waddle, Steeler, Tua, even A-Chan, you can toss in there a little bit, and now Savanea being added, Kenneth Grant. You have pieces, Chop Robinson if he develops, that you can build around, but they have so much money sunk in these older players, and then you have gaping holes in your roster, like the cornerback position, where like it's either Cam Smith or Storm Duck as the starter. Your safeties have been turnover like constantly. They've been moving. You've been Jordan Poyer, Brandon Jones, Javon Holland just left you, so you not only have stability there, you're losing stability on a lot of spots on your team, and the fact that you're not settled right now and you can get off those bigger contracts and like. Tyreek Hill was just on a stream saying he wanted to punch Mike McDaniel in the face for not giving him more targets. Like, get off of that guy. Yeah. Get off of Jalen Ramsey. He's been counting down the days until he can get traded. There's a bunch of guys that don't want to be on your team, don't fit your current life cycle, and if you move off of them and get good enough returns back, maybe not this year won't be good, but with a good draft and offseason next year with that new capital opened up, you're not. It's not like you're going to blow it up and then you have to restart from the beginning. You have good pieces to continue. It's just going to be you have to make that decision probably this offseason or this season heading into it to sell off pieces to be able to start up there.
And Owen, I would even argue that even if you sell low, as in you just release the player, and you may not even get draft capital back, just clearing the cap and getting younger adds value. Obviously, you would prefer to get a draft pick back. Mm-hmm. But when last year, if you remember the week before the conference championships, we did kind of like an analysis of the final four teams. And I did some analysis of all 32 teams draft and contract status. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that makes Miami unique, they were an outlier. So Miami had among the fewest draft picks on the team for 4 years, meaning that when we analyzed the 2024 roster, they didn't have a lot of their own draft picks on the team from 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Right? They were relatively low. So the drafting of Miami is, to me, should be under a lot of scrutiny. But the flip side of that is Miami had a lot of players that had been under contract for 4 or 5 years, but they weren't their own draft picks, right? Because like Tyreek Hill wasn't drafted by Miami.
No, Jalen Ramsey drafted by Miami.
Exactly.
Miami. Jonnu Smith wasn't drafted by Miami. They've been able to replace in free agency and get continuity and good serviceable starters for them. But it puts them in NBA, it puts them in a weird 500 playoff team. They're fighting for that 7th or 8th seed in NBA. I'm thinking NBA wise. They're fighting to make the playoffs in that playing game, but they're in the first round bouncing every year. Los Angeles Clippers, for example. It's bad to compare NBA to NFL, but that's kind of what this Miami Dolphins team feels like, just stuck in the middle.
And my opinion is that, so like Buffalo was in that at the beginning of Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. Yeah. They had to replace players with free agents. The problem with that is that it gets expensive, right? You eventually have to replace the free agents you sign with draft picks that you draft, because that's how you gain cost control of your roster. Miami hasn't done that. So to the point that both Josh and Owen have made is Miami looks like they have some good draft picks, the Chop Robinsons, the Kenneth Grants, the Jonas Savaneas. We could even go back. They got the Tennessee running back, Jalen Wright. They have draft picks I I think very highly of. But what you need to do is you need to make sure that they're in a role, and you need to keep drafting. Like, just because you drafted right doesn't prevent you from drafting Ollie Gordon. Right? You have to, and that's how you build the roster. So it looks good, but to your point, they have to be able to move off of Ramsey, move off of Smith, move off of Tyreek Hill, and continue to bring in more players. I think it's a 1-year reset. The question is the 1-year reset 2024 to 2025? Meaning, are we looking at it now, or is the reset after this season?
Mm-hmm.
I think either way, you're probably okay, because to Josh's point right now, you need to raise the ceiling. We're talking about. We need to get off the guys we had previously. Our ceiling was 11-6 in losing in the first round with the previous roster. Get off of those guys, get younger. And even if that's going to be this offseason where you get younger, like not the offseason currently, like the following season, 25-26, we're talking in June of 2026 about how the Dolphins are finally drafting, investing right, and they have a bunch of young, promising pieces coming up. Maybe that year it's also not going to be their year, but the next season in 2027, like at that point, they're now going to be peaking with that ceiling. You have Tua still in his prime. And when you're looking at like a team that, like, the reason they're struggling so much to find playoffs consistently is because they have the Bills in their division, and the Bills were gettable this year, and this team couldn't do it.
Yeah,
like the Bills were gettable in that division, and then they couldn't put it together. So now you're looking at this core and a Bills team that improved over this past offseason, that's been improving. You got to hope maybe in that 2-year span after, you move off your older guys, get guys in and start developing, that in that 2 to 3 seasons down the road, when you're peaking with your new younger core, the Bills are now on their downside because they're getting older, and now they're having to make some harder decisions, especially with their roster and age-wise.
It was really good, though, to compare Miami and Kansas City on this podcast, though, because it shows the fundamental difference in the two. Kansas City's able to draft for depth right now and then replace Miami's drafting guys that they need to contribute right away, whether they like it or not. Like, let's be real. We're a Jalen Ramsey and Cahill injury away from Storm Duck, Cam Smith, and Jason Marshall being your starting cornerbacks. You're one safety away from Elijah Campbell being your starting safety. You're a Zach Sealer injury away from 3 out of your 4 interior defensive linemen to be rookies. You're one Pharaoh Brown injury away from Jalen Conyers probably being your starting or your tight end 2 on the team. Like, they don't have the depth on the defensive side of the ball and on some positions on the offensive side of the ball to say, okay, we can keep these high cap guys right now and still have the hope and optimism that we can make it far.
Cool. Well, we've been going for almost 75 minutes. So we're kind of at the threshold of, the podcast has to end. Oh, no.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. For Owen, Josh, myself, for the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, for Jake and Home Squad Sports in the chat, thank you for stopping by. We will see you on a podcast again tomorrow night, everybody.